Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Casey. This is Casey Undercovers. Today I'm going to do my first reading vlog. I don't know what to call this series, so if you all have suggestions, do leave them down below for me. I've never done a reading vlog before, but I have done like full spoiler book review summary type videos. So this is kind of that, but also me checking in as I'm reading, so you get my kind of live reactions, and I'll be adding in little clips of me reading, like my response to something in the book right away. So we'll be hearing from in the moment me as well as filming me. Before we get started, like, subscribe, do hit the notification bell to get notified of all your bookish content, and let's get started. So I put up a poll asking what I should read next. This was in reference to picking a book for the Buzzwordathon challenge. The prompt for the month of January was before or after. So I needed the word before or after in the title. And I put up these three choices here, and you all had a clear opinion on them. So I will be reading Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. I've never read a Riley Sager book before, though I do know they are quite the divisive author. It is very much a love or hate relationship I see people having with this author. So this is my first experience, and I have some opinions already. I am 88 pages in, so this is my first update. I'm 88 pages in, and I'm gonna go ahead and give you some thoughts, so let's get started. If you want to read this book going into it blind, then I definitely suggest this video is not for you. This is a full spoiler-tastic video, but the first update I'm going to be giving you is only the first 88 pages, so it is basically just the setup of the book. If you want to just watch the first part of this and then go read the book and then come back and review the rest with me, that's totally okay, but just be fully aware that I am going to spoil this book beginning, middle, and end. Home Before Dark by Riley Sager is a paranormal horror story surrounding a haunted house. It does have those gothic vibes as well, since we are in Baneberry Manor for the majority of the story. And this book is dual POV. The main point of view is from Maggie Holt. This is the daughter of Ewan Holt. Ewan Holt wrote a book called House of Horrors, and this is the second POV that we are experiencing, is the book that kind of plagues Maggie's life. In the beginning of this story, Maggie is meeting with her father's attorney after he has passed away. She's receiving her inheritance, which includes Baneberry Hall. Now, she did not know that her father still had this property, so she is quite surprised when his final words on his deathbed were not to go back. "It's not safe for you," he told her. But Maggie, in her adult life, does renovate old houses. Baneberry Hall does fit that description, so there's kind of no stopping her from going to this house. Maggie was 5 years old when the events of House of Horrors occurred. They were only in the house for 20 days. You may at this point be getting some Amityville horror vibes, and I would agree. Home Before Dark seems to be paying homage to some of the legendary horror icons, some of the legendary horror stories like the Amityville Horror and Stephen King. I am getting some Ed and Lorraine Warren vibes as well. It does seem to be wanting to pay homage to those iconic stories and characters. So Maggie doesn't really remember what happened when she was 5 years old. All she has is her father's narrative, the House of Horrors book, to go on. And it is the bane of her existence. She hates being tied back to this story, to this book, to this house. After her father has passed away, after meeting with the attorney, she also meets with her mother and tries to get information out of her, trying to see what really happened at Baneberry Hall all those years ago. We are 25 years past the events of House of Horrors at this point. But her mother isn't talking. She's really never been talking about this, and she says, "Your father made it all up to sell his book. He tried to write a fiction novel. He couldn't sell it, so he sold it as a nonfiction, and we never imagined it would be as popular as it was." At the time that the book had come out, the Holt family was doing press tours and going on talk shows with little Maggie. They're insisting all of this was real, but now the mother says no, it wasn't. But her father's dying words keep pressing her that this happened, something happened, I need to know what happens. So Maggie does go to Baneberry Hall. It's in a little bit of rough shape, but there has been a caretaker who is wildly attractive and in his early 40s. Maggie's about 30, so this is going to go down probably. And also a cleaning woman who takes care of the house. She also learns by interacting with this caretaker that her father has been coming back year after year for one night a year on the anniversary of when the family fled. This is all news to Maggie. She didn't know her father still owned this house, let alone was coming back once a year. So that is Maggie's point of view in this story. When we look at Ewan's point of view, when we are reading House of Horrors, this is Ewan's point of view. This is his version of what happened that was published. We don't know if this is a reliable account of what happened or a fictionalized version to sell stories, as the mother has told us. So when the Holt family comes to look at Baneberry Hall, they're looking for a larger house. They're looking for an upgrade from the one-bedroom apartment they are living in, where 5-year-old Maggie has quickly outgrown this house. They're all on top of each other. They're fighting all the time. It's making problems in the marriage. We really just need more space. But Baneberry Hall is a bit more than they were hoping to find. It's more house than they needed, but it is under budget. But you know, a big house like this being sold dirt cheap has some kind of trauma surrounding it. Our realtor, Joni June, is kind of hush-hushing, dodging questions about what happened at Baneberry Hall, but we do learn that the previous owners, the father, unalived his daughter and then unalived himself, leaving the mother a grieving widow, a grieving mother who wants nothing to do with this house, selling everything in it, don't want anything from it, you have at it. But this isn't enough to deter the Holt family. Ewan the father is very intrigued by this kind of character in a house, its quirks, its uniqueness. He doesn't like cookie cutter houses. The mother is very, very hesitant to buy a house with this kind of dark past. She doesn't want this leaking into their family, exasperating the problems they already have, but they agree they're gonna buy the house. Now I'll tell you exactly why you shouldn't buy this house. Had it been me going into this house, this would have ended real quick. And past me, reading me, is gonna tell you all about it. So I'm reading Home Before Dark by Riley Sager, and I am on page 24, and I can tell you right this moment that this is where this book would end for me if I were here, and I'll read to you why. We gathered on the front porch while Janie June removed the keys from the lockbox hanging on the door handle. She then took a deep breath, her padded shoulders rising and falling. Just before she opened the door, she made the sign of the cross. Like, you go to a house with history, you know it's got some confusing history and some tourism because some things have happened here, but the realtor going inside is making the sign of the cross before you go in. Bro, we're not seeing this house. I think we can make the apartment work after all. We are not going in. This is where this book would end for me personally. I am not moving into no haunted ass house. Why do these people always move into these haunted ass houses? Like, oh, the price is really good. Yeah, so is it down the street where it's not haunted. Like, why are we didn't need this much house anyway. That is not the only reason we should not be going into this house or we should not be buying this house. In just one chapter, these are the things that happen, right? I'm going to read you my list. Cold spots when entering the foyer. Nice chill, even though it's warm outside and warm inside. There's a creepy ass painting of the guy who built the house over the fireplace that cannot be removed. It is painted on the stone. The Historical Society wants absolutely nothing to do with this historical landmark house, and the realtor's not willing to say why. They left the room and the chandelier was off. They re-entered the room, the chandelier is on. Then, as I mentioned, the previous owner doesn't want any of the furniture or anything in the house. They want nothing to do with this house. Maggie feels another cold spot in the daughter's room, and the daughter reminding you was unalived. And the aforementioned unaliving of daughter and father. So those are just a few reasons not to buy this house. I would not have taken the tour after the sign of the cross at the door. That is not a good sign. But alas, this story is not about me. They buy the house, they move in. And that's kind of where I am in the first 88 pages. Not too much has happened yet. We're just kind of getting the setup. Maggie is going to stay in this house now as she renovates it on her own, and we are moving on. So I'll catch you in a bit for another update. All right, I thought it was time for another update. I have been reading while I was at work today. If I look a little crazy, a little tired, it's because I just got home, made dinner. I will insert some clips here because not only do I like to read books, I like to cook, so I'm going to share a little bit of that here with you right now. So I made Korean beef and beefless bowls for dinner from damndelicious.net. I will link the recipe down below for you if you're at all curious. Also, don't forget that you can replant your green onions in water and they will grow. So definitely make sure you're doing that. I added a bag of coleslaw between these two pans to give us some extra veg. And here is the finished product. It is so good, you guys, like so good. I'm gonna leave the recipe from damndelicious.net down in the description if you want to check it out, and I highly advise adding this into your meal rotation. But back to the books. I was reading while at work today. On the weekends, on Saturday, I actually work in the office and get a chance to read in between phone calls, and I am on to page 156. So I thought it was a good time to do an update so I don't forget too much. I took so many notes. Like, look at all these post-its. I took so many notes when I was reading because I didn't want to forget anything. All right, we are moving into, I keep wanting to call it Manderley. We are moving into Baneberry Hall in this part of the book, and through Ewan's point of view, we are seeing that he has hired Elsa, the housekeeper, to come and help unpack, and she brings her two daughters. You know, after meeting Maddie and seeing that Maddie is kind of lonely, she brings her two daughters, Hannah and Petra, to play with her. Petra's 16 though, so she's more of the babysitter. Hannah is 6 and the bossy of the bunch, and they're playing hide and seek. Now, hide and seek is giving me all the Conjuring vibes, but also from the movie Hide and Seek. Does anybody remember this movie with Robert De Niro and Dakota Fanning? I liked it back in the day, but it's giving me those kind of vibes, and really more so for The Conjuring, because there is a giant armoire in Maggie's new bedroom that belonged to previous tenants. It's big, it's hand carved. It reminds me of like the big ugly mirror in The Conjuring: The Last Rites, even though this book came out in 2020 and The Conjuring: The Last Rites came out in 2025. Anyway, big creepy furniture. Never goes well. So while the girls are playing hide and seek, Ewan is downstairs unpacking in the kitchen, and in the kitchen there are like a string of bells, like think Cinderella bells, like where you ring for room service. From back when Baneberry Hall was a bed and breakfast and people would ring for room service. Well, the bell that is in Maggie's room is ringing. So Ewan goes upstairs to get the girls to stop playing with the bells, but they're not there pulling on the bells. Instead, he's looking around and Maggie is looking for the girls, but he's focusing on the armoire. He opens it, there's nobody there. So big creepy armoire, playing hide and seek. This is very much The Conjuring coming around into this book. Now, at night there have been noises, and Ewan just kind of chalks this up to being an old house, getting used to the sounds of this old house versus the sounds of their old city apartment. And he's hearing thuds, he's hearing, you know, banging around, he's hearing whooshy sounds, he's hearing all kinds of things. He goes to check on Maggie down the hall, and her door just, it shuts itself. Her door shuts itself, maybe a draft. Let's say it's a draft. It was wide open when we put her to bed, but it shut itself. He goes into the bedroom and the doors are wide open on the armoire. So he's like, why are you opening this? And she's like, Daddy, I'm sleeping. So some weird goings on. These kind of little haunting type hints keep happening throughout his chapters. You know, he'll go out of the room, he'll come back, the chandelier is on again. Like things like that keep happening. In one of Ewan's chapters, we see that he has found in his office a box with a Polaroid camera and some pictures in it. And the pictures are of Curtis Carver, the previous father who unalived his daughter. And he's taking pictures of himself day after day. And he's looking more gaunt, more tired, more restless, more gone, really, before the events of him unaliving his daughter and unaliving himself. So in that moment, Ewan is kind of playing with the camera. He takes a picture of himself as well. He sees his wife and daughter playing outside, takes a picture of them. As the photo develops, he sees a shadowy figure down in the bottom corner of the photo, and he is seeing them going off into the woods. A few minutes later, he hears shrieking, screaming, piercing screams. He goes running outside to see what's going on. Jess, his wife, is screaming. Maggie is screaming. She has fallen and hit her head on what turns out to be a tombstone. The tombstone belongs to William Garson, the original builder of the house. He's the creepy guy in the painting in the living room that can't be removed. Now Maggie has her scar that we know in present day that she has. She now has this scar. She's got to go to the hospital, but turns out she doesn't need stitches. It's not that bad, just a band-aid. Baby's gonna be fine. In one of Ewan's chapters, we also find that Indigo, the daughter of William Garson, Indigo Garson, the girl in the painting on the other side of the fireplace. She was smitten with the man who painted her. They wanted to run away together. Her father disapproved, and out of rage, anger, and heartbreak, that she ate baneberries, poisoned herself, and unalived herself, and also died within this house. This is information that Ewan chooses not to share with his wife, Jess. She's already freaking out enough that 2 other people have died in this house. He doesn't want to add to the body count, so he chooses not to say anything to his wife. Guaranteed this is a mistake later, which is something I must rant about this book. I am only 150 something pages in, and 5 times already there has been moments where like, oh, if only we had known what we were gonna know later. And I hate when they spoil things in the book that way. 5 times. I'm keeping a tally. I'll keep you updated. It keeps happening, and I cannot stand when they tell me, if only we'd have known what we knew then, if only we'd have known how wrong we were. I hate that in a book. A few days after the tombstone to the face incident, Maggie starts playing with an imaginary friend in her room, and her father is going to talk to her to ask her, did you turn on the music last night? The night before and the night before, the record player that he found in his study had been turned on in the middle of the night, playing the Sound of Music soundtrack. And he is asking Maggie, because it wasn't Jess who turned on the radio, or who turned on the record player. He's asking Maggie, did you go upstairs? Did you turn on the music? Please don't do that. And she tells him, no, it wasn't me. And she asks her imaginary friend, oh, no, it wasn't her either. When he wants to take her outside to play, take her away from this quote-unquote imaginary friend that she's never had before, she tells her imaginary little girlfriend, you can stay and play, but I don't like the others, implying there is more than one imaginary friend. So, little bit of a red flag to the father, and he's starting to think that maybe something is wrong with his daughter, not necessarily the house. Also, there is a Cujo name drop when he is telling Jess, his wife, that their daughter has imaginary friends, yet he describes her toothpaste foaming at the mouth like Cujo, yet another Stephen King Easter egg. So while Ewan is getting his family settled into Baneberry Hall in the present storyline, Maggie is trying to get her equipment together. She has hired Dane, the grandson of the former groundskeeper who now keeps up Baneberry Hall, or did for her father. He is going to be helping her with some of the renovation work. When Maggie is going through the house, we see it is quite like her father said in interviews. She opens up the armoire, she sees all her childhood clothing is still there. They didn't grab not one scrap of clothing. In her playroom, the toys are still on the floor like she just disappeared and never came back. Her mother's jewelry is still there. Her wedding dress is still there. Like everything that the family should have taken, it's still there. Now, when Maggie goes to bed at night, she is laying in her childhood bed. Not the one I would pick, but okay. Laying in her childhood bed, kind of looking at the ceiling, just thinking about things. She hears a sound outside. She goes and looks, and she sees a shadowy figure standing in the tree line. And just like any rational, smart person does, she runs outside to catch this person unarmed and barefoot, leaves the house wide open, and goes and checks it out. Nobody is there, of course. Now, in the beginning of the book, we hear about Mr. Shadow. This is the shadowy figure in the photo that we've seen, possibly, that kind of had haunted Maggie when she was a child. And this is the basis of the story House of Horrors that her father wrote. So we're starting to get some of the images of Mr. Shadow. We're starting to get an idea that he's around, possibly. Or it could just be somebody chilling, watching the House of Horrors that they've read about. We don't know yet. When Maggie is going through all of the house and seeing all her family's belongings, all this antique furniture, it really strikes her like, was it worth giving up everything that they had for a lie, for this best-selling book that they didn't even know was going to be popular? Like, the two ideas don't seem to match, and that kind of pushes me into believing that maybe there really is something to this House of Horror books. Maybe it was really haunted. Maybe it wasn't just to sell a story. Because to give up everything your family has and to have your family ostracized from the community, for your daughter to be isolated because of the story you told, is it all worth it? And what parent would really make that choice? That's kind of another question we're being posed as we read the story. We also get a memory from Maggie that when she was reading the book for the first time when she was 9 years old, that she confronted her parents about portraying her in a way she didn't feel she was in the book. That Maggie in the book was a character and not at all like herself. She felt she was brave and fearless, but who doesn't think of themselves that way as a child? But in the book, she's very shy, she's lonesome, she's kind of a weirdo, and Maggie was furious as a child to be portrayed this way, but I'm calling it right now. Maggie is not Maggie, okay? She has no memory of years 5 and older. I remember things before I was 5 years old. She has no memory of this haunting, no memory of Baneberry Hall. Her scar showed up at the wrong time in the photos. In the photos that her father had taken, there are pictures from a sleepover with Petra and Hannah. Her scar is not there, meaning that it would have had to take place 3 days or so in, like, before she hit her face on the tombstone. We've already read up to the point where she hit her face on the tombstone. The sleepover has only just been proposed a few days later. So it's not adding up. So I'm calling it now. This is not Maggie. There is some switcheroo going on here. I don't think this is Maggie at all. Now, also being posed to Maggie when she is speaking to a local reporter that originally reported on the happenings at Baneberry Hall, he lets her know that Petra, who was believed to have run away, she disappeared on the day that the family disappeared and left the house, which cannot be a coincidence. And Petra has never been seen since. And the reporter kind of insinuates that there was some kind of affection between you and her father and Petra, who was a 16-year-old child, which is gross. She's not having it. But what happened to Petra, we don't know. And we still don't know all of the hauntings goings on either. So this is just one more insidious layer to the story. Maggie and Dane go out into the yard trying to verify that this graveyard where she supposedly hit her face when she was a child really does exist. And they do come across a graveyard, but it is not with the Garson family plots. It is a pet cemetery. Yes, a Stephen King reference. This is the second one in this book that I've caught. This book is a little bit like an Easter egg hunt. I'm kind of picking up on all kinds of Easter eggs from other horror things, and I'm enjoying that part. But it is a pet cemetery, and she is describing the headstones to be of marble, to where her father in the book described them as being brick-like. So they're not at all the same. Could be that he fictionalized it. Could be that there are two plots in the yard. We don't know. Just one other interesting thing that I want to note. I know I'm not doing a very good job of telling this story because my brain is fried after being at work. But later when we get another Maggie flashback kind of scene where she's talking to her father, she's a teenager, they're on a trip to Paris after Ewan and Jess have divorced, they're on a trip to Paris, and she's asking her father, pressing him about the events in the book. And she's like, why did you get divorced if you love each other so much? And he tells her, and I quote, sometimes a couple can go through something so terrible that not even love can fix it. And I'm thinking, is that the loss of a child? They separated after they left Baneberry Hall. Is it because they didn't have Maggie anymore? I'm just kind of piecing together this puzzle that I totally think I'm onto. And I could be talking out my ass. I could be making this up. This could be way off, but I'd like you to know that I had thoughts. So that is my second update. 156, what did I say? 156 pages in. I'm about halfway through. Halfway? No, not even halfway. About 40% through. I will keep you updated. I'm sorry that was such a scattered portion, but at work I'm really limited as to what I can write down. So I hope that was cohesive enough to put together what was going on, and I'll be back with an update again later. I literally just finished giving you my update, but I gotta give you this little nugget from the very beginning of the next chapter in the book. We are finding out some of the imaginary friends that Maggie is spending time with, and that is the first known sighting of Mr. Shadow, the girl with no name that she was playing with, and Mrs. Pennyface, who has pennies for eyes, but she can still see. So this just got super interesting. This book I'm having a lot of fun with this book. I hope I'm not giving it too much credit and that it doesn't turn out to be a flop. I'm really hoping it goes the extra mile. Just saying. It is 2 days later. I spent all day yesterday reading, and I am up to page 307. I have just a little bit left to go, but I did read so much that I wanted to stop and make an update before I get to the conclusion of the book. I have like 4 pages of notes, so let's just dive into it. And I think I'm going to be going back and forth between what's happening in the chapters rather than what I've been doing Ewan's and then doing Maggie's point of view, because that's how I took my notes as I was reading. So bear with me. In Ewan's POV chapter, he is in the kitchen and drinking coffee, and he hears a plop when he's turned around, drinks his coffee, feels a weird slither across his face. There is a baby snake in his coffee cup, and pour one out for all the homies. That is no way to enjoy coffee. And snakes start raining out of the ceiling. The ceiling crumbles in, and snakes are literally pouring out of the ceiling. And this does explain what happened when we first got to Baneberry Hall and there was a snake in the indigo room. The indigo room is right above the kitchen, so it explains how the snake got there. Also, I'm sorry if you hear any like car noises or whatever. I have my windows open. It is 63 degrees in South Florida today, and I cannot resist the fresh air. The 3 days a year I get to open my windows, so do bear with me. Now, in a similar POV, Maggie is in her kitchen and Dane starts poking the ceiling because it is bulging out, but instead of snakes falling out of the ceiling, a bag of bones falls out of the ceiling. And Maggie immediately believes that these are Petra's bones. Petra went missing. This is, people think her father had something to do with it. There are bones in this house. It does kind of all add up. And the case against Ewan killing Petra is building. He did return to the house year after year on the anniversary of fleeing, which is the anniversary of Petra's disappearance. What makes us really believe that these are Petra's bones is that in one of the evidence bags collected after the police have examined the scene is a gold crucifix, just like Petra used to wear. Going back to Ewan's point of view, looking up in the hole of the ceiling, this is when we get the picture of both Petra and Jess looking up into the ceiling that Maggie finds later. They find a tin biscuit box. And in this biscuit box are love letters to Indigo from presumably the painter that she wanted to marry, that her father denied the privilege of marriage. And this is how Ewan discovers the hidey hole from the Indigo room upstairs that we will see Maggie find in the previous chapter. Now, Petra tells Ewan, I have a fascination for old things, and he gives her these love letters. Jess doesn't want them around anyway. He promised when they moved in that they wouldn't be digging into Baneberry Hall's past, so he gives the letters to Petra. And that night, right on cue, despite the record player having been put away in the closet, the 16 going on 17 track starts playing again. Skipping back to Maggie's chapter, because her ceiling is caved in and they have found a body in her house is a crime scene and she can't be there tonight, so she goes and stays in a motel. Having been covered in grit, grime, and dust, she takes a shower and references Psycho, yet another horror iconic Easter egg moment. Dane visits Maggie at the motel and brings beer and booze, and she opts for booze. They chit-chat, but opt not to take their relationship further, which was kind of disappointing because Dane is just there. He has no personality. He's bearing no significance in this story. Like, is he a character in this book, or is he just eye candy for Maggie? I really don't understand his purpose in this book, and if they drop a bunch of purpose into him at the end of the book, I'm gonna be mad. Back to Ewan, he and Jess are in the kitchen arguing over his alleged attraction to Petra. She accuses him of having an attraction to her after taking the picture in the kitchen, which she was also in. Ewan accuses Jess of playing the soundtrack to mess with him. She accuses him of being attracted to Petra. The doorbell rings, the argument's interrupted. Ewan goes upstairs to answer the door. It is Petra. Petra actually had let herself in, and she heard quite a bit of the argument, or so he thinks, but she is there to discuss the letters to Indigo Garrison that she had taken the day before, and has found some pretty interesting things within these letters. Petra and Ewan come to suspect that Indigo did not poison herself, that her father poisoned her to prevent this marriage by any means necessary. These chapters are very short and very quick, so I'm sorry if I'm moving back and forth a lot. Maggie returns to Bainbury Hall, given a police escort by Chief Alcott, because since there is a body having been found in Bainbury Hall, the press, the news, they are swarming the gates. So she gets a police escort home. Her and Chief Alcott talk, and Chief Alcott happens to drop on her that Dane doesn't get much work and was available to work as a contractor with Maggie on Bainbury Hall because he is an ex-con. He had been arrested and served time for aggravated assault after having been in a bar fight. But if you've seen Con Air, you know that that can happen to anyone, and really to him if he has a really shitty lawyer. Now Maggie begins digging around in the house, and she finds 24 notes inside of the secretary desk that has been left in Bainbury Hall, and they have kind of ominous questions on them like why and where is my sister, which points Maggie to Hannah. And there are 24 notes because these have been left year after year after year after Petra went missing. Hannah leaves them for Ewan year after year. So Maggie is on her way to speak to Hannah. Going back into Ewan's chapter, I'm picking up on the recurring pattern of the death of a daughter. Indigo Garson, Katie Carver, Maggie Holt, maybe. Because Petra was not a resident of Bainbury Hall, so it doesn't seem that her death would fill the need of history repeating itself in Bainbury Hall. Even though she is a daughter, she's not a daughter of Bainbury Hall. So maybe Petra's not dead. I'm just saying. Ewan and Petra meet up at the local library and begin investigating the newspapers and reportings on Indigo Garson's death, and they find that the death really wasn't investigated to its fullest extent. The way it was written about was, oh, woe is William Garson, not so much that Indigo herself was a person or that she mattered, and that really upsets Petra. And they also read that there was an eyewitness account of a servant in Bainbury Hall who saw William Garson take Bainberries to her, and hours later she was found dead. But he was cleared. He was never charged with Indigo's murder. At the end of this meeting, we are reminded that the upcoming infamous sleepover is tomorrow night. We know that this was a big event in the friendship between Hannah, Petra, and Maggie. Back to Maggie's chapter, and I'm getting whiplash. She goes and speaks to Hannah at the Dittmer cottage and asks her about these notes that have been left for her father. And the biggest revelation in this chapter is that Ewan returned to Bainbury Hall 2 weeks after they initially fled, that Petra had been sneaking out a few weeks before her disappearance, and that it kind of coincided with the Holt family's arrival at Bainbury Hall, giving Maggie a great sense of unease that maybe there was an affair going on between Ewan and Petra. And Hannah also tells us that the reason she initially believed that Petra had run away is because her teddy bear Buster was missing. Now, we already know that Maggie and Dane found a teddy bear in the closet in her father's study when she was initially investigating and going through all the furniture and things at Bainbury Hall and found that teddy bear that then went missing again. So this was likely, and she does believe so, this was Buster, Petra's teddy bear. And Hannah also tells us that the sleepover chapter of Ewan's book, which we haven't read yet, is absolutely true, every single word. The following chapter of Ewan's does detail that sleepover, and everything is going fine, kind of, sort of. You know, the girls are having fun, but initially Maggie is very hesitant to be doing this sleepover because the ghosts don't want the girls here. They're angry, particularly Miss Pennyface. The girls go to bed, Jess and Ewan go to their room, and they begin to argue again. And this is disrupted by a scream coming from down the hall from Maggie's room. Ewan bursts into the room, and the armoire doors are wide open. The dresses in the armoire have been thrown absolutely everywhere. The closet doors are wide open. Maggie is on her bed screaming. Hannah is huddling in her sleeping bag, terrified, and Maggie is screaming that the ghosts are in the room. Hannah jumps up on the bed trying to calm Maggie down, and Maggie punches her in the face out of nowhere, just blasts her in the face, and everything stops. The doors to the armoire close themselves, the closet doors close themselves, and everything stops dead. Going back to Maggie's point of view, she's having girl dinner of chips, nuts, and beer and reviewing the Polaroids that her father had taken. She's trying to work out the timeline, and she is coming upon the conclusion that I came onto many, many moons ago, that the timeline is out of order. Her scar doesn't line up with the events from the book. In the picture from the sleepover, she doesn't have the scar yet, but in the events of the book, she should have already hit her face on the tombstone. And while she is working this timeline out, the record player upstairs goes off again, 16 going on 17, which is referring to Indigo turning 17. She was 16 when the painter proposed marriage to her. This is a reference to Indigo, which I forgot to mention up until this point, sorry. Just like she has in the past, Maggie goes rushing upstairs trying to catch the intruder to find no one but Buster. Buster is sitting on the desk. Maggie calls the police, the sheriff comes over, finds no sign of an intruder, and Maggie does what I would have done from the beginning and smashes this record player all to hell with a sledgehammer. Back to Ewan's point of view, Ewan and Jess take Maggie to a child psychologist who, in the end, says that Maggie is just fine. She's having trouble adjusting. This is her way of adjusting to a new environment, and she may have picked up on some of the adult conversation when the realtor and parents were speaking prior of what happened to Katie Carver and Curtis Carver. And while Ewan is in the waiting room waiting while Maggie talks to the psychologist, he remembers Maggie's birth and that she was born with her umbilical cord wrapped around her neck. And this is possibly why she is ghost sensitive at such a young age, is because she was kind of born 1 foot in the grave. Now, when the family returns home, Jess and Ewan decide that they are going to sit down and talk to Maggie about Katie Carver and Curtis Carver. And they do so with the aid of a clipped out newspaper article with a picture of the family, and Maggie immediately recognizes 2 out of the 3 people in this picture. She says, "That's the little girl in my room, and that is Mr. Shadow." So, confirming what I already thought, that Katie is the girl who can't leave her room, the girl with no name, and then also confirming that Curtis Carver is Mr. Shadow. And also just putting a pin here that I definitely think that Miss Pennyface is Indigo Garson. I just don't know who else it could be. Back to Maggie's POV, she has Dane for a ride into town, and I think it's kind of shitty of her considering she doesn't want anything to do with him giving his ex-con pass. Maggie thinks that Dane was lying to her, and she doesn't want any more lies in her life. She thinks he was lying to her by not immediately being forthcoming about his time in prison. He quits as her employee. She's like, okay, go home, I'll find my own way home, and continues to the child psychologist's office that she saw when she was young. More whiplash, back to Ewan's point of view. After another bell-ringing incident, Ewan does what no sane person would do and pulls out a Ouija board, the one straight out of Paranormal Activity, a nice thick wooden board one with a ivory, what is that called? You know, this, you know what I mean. Pulls the best looking fucking Ouija board I've ever seen, if I'm quoting Katie from Paranormal Activity, which is another little Easter egg here. And he communicates, and he and Jess, though she's dead set against this, communicate with the entity who says he is Curtis Carver. And I'm just gonna say, nope, nope, nope. When it's just time to pull out the Ouija board, it's time to pull out of the house. The important part of this conversation is that supposedly the ghost of Curtis Carver spells out careful on the Ouija board, a warning to them. Not a threat, but a warning. His warnings up to this point, his threats up to this point have been, you're going to die here, which are very ominous, but it's possible he is warning them that they are in danger. Now, while they are messing with the Ouija board, Maggie screams upstairs. Maggie be screaming upstairs a lot. And she says Mr. Shadow was here, and the armoire doors are wide open. Back to Maggie, desperate to find answers, she seeks out the local library, which burned down and was never rebuilt. And out of desperation, she goes to the one place she can find answers, and that is the local newspaper, where Brian Prince, the man who has been hounding her for an interview and initially interviewed her father, he works. He agrees to allow her to go through the archives if she agrees to an interview. They start pulling volumes out, and she confirms all of the newspaper things that he and Petra had found. So that's one less lie on Ewan's part. We're arguing in the kitchen again. Ewan and Jess are arguing about the Ouija board and about Maggie, and this is all we ever do in this house. Now, after Jess storms out of the kitchen, the bells on the wall that were once part of the bed and breakfast situation, they start ringing in a very distinct pattern, and Ewan gets the idea to write out the alphabet according to the 24 bells on the wall, and he decodes the message, and he begins communicating once again with who he believes is Curtis Carver. And he begins asking him some questions, the most important of which is, "Did you kill your daughter?" To which he repeatedly says no. Now, after Maggie has questioned Brian Prince on the matters at Bainbury Hall, she goes to Marta Carver, the surviving widow and mother of Curtis and Katie Carver. She goes to the bakery. They arrange to talk later, that Marta will meet her at Bainbury Hall, which is very unusual. She has never been able to return after the death of her daughter and death of her husband. Ewan also seeks out Marta Carver in his chapter, wanting to discuss the incidents at Bainbury Hall. She's quite reluctant to have this conversation until he brings up that he's worried for Maggie, and she relents and agrees to meet him at the library in 10 minutes. Through their conversation, Ewan learns that Marta's husband Curtis also heard the tap-tap-tapping that he has been hearing in the night. And this would lead us to believe that it was not Mr. Shadow or the girl with no name Katie doing the tap-tap-tapping. Marta also tells us that Katie was a sickly child experiencing fatigue and nausea, and despite going to many doctors, they gave her a clean bill of health. There was no real reason why Katie was sick. Marta recounts to us the day that she found Katie and Curtis. She found Curtis first after hearing a thud upstairs at 4:54 a.m. This is the same thud that has been waking up Ewan every single night since he moved into Bainbury Hall. And this, of course, is Curtis's body hitting the floor after he unalived himself. She's panicking. She's screaming for Katie to call 911, but there is no response from Katie. She goes to Katie's room. Of course, we know that Katie has also passed. Ewan suggests to Marta that it's something other than Curtis that killed Katie and himself. She freaks out. How insensitive could she be? And storms away. And right about here, I'm pretty sure that Marta Carver unalived her daughter and her husband herself. She is acting very suspicious in the next few chapters, and to wrap it all up, I think she may actually be our culprit. Ewan sees a painting of William Garson, and he is holding a walking cane, a tap, tap, tap kind of walking cane. It is William Garson, possibly, that he has been hearing walking through the house at night. Okay, meeting back with Maggie and Marta, meeting outside Bainbury Hall. Marta can't go through with going inside, and they instead chit-chat on the porch. Marta confirms to us that she did speak to Ewan like it says in the books, but that the conversation about Curtis having not committed the crimes against his daughter and himself never did occur, that he made that up, it's fictionalized. So when Maggie poses the same question to Marta, could it be possible that Curtis is innocent? She says that he left a note behind explaining that he didn't want to see Katie suffer sick anymore and that he had fallen into depression himself. Marta and Maggie talk some more, and it comes around to the conversation that, oh, I don't blame you for selling artifacts from Bainbury Hall. And Maggie's like, what do you mean? I'm not selling anything. She looks it up. Sure enough, somebody is selling artifacts from Bainbury Hall, and it includes items that have gone missing that she's noticed, including a letter opener that she used when she first got there that had William Garson's initials on it. And it is, in fact, listed online. So that is where I am. I have 80 pages left. 80 pages? I think I have about 80 pages left. I'm going to finish this book today. I will give you my final thoughts in the next update after a nap. I am quite tired, so I will see you all in a bit. It is several days later. I have finished Home Before Dark, but haven't had time to film, so let's just jump right into it. Ewan goes to the Ditmar cottage to ask Petra's help in babysitting Maggie, but Petra is being punished and is saying her prayers. So Elsa agrees to watch Maggie, but just for an hour, and on the walk back to Bainbury Hall, she asks if Maggie is still seeing ghosts. She has kind of always believed that Maggie really was seeing something. She's a very superstitious woman, and Ewan asks if Maggie is in danger. And Elsa says what I have been thinking this entire time, all daughters at Bainbury Hall are in danger. So while Elsa is watching Maggie, Ewan sorts through the remaining articles that he found relating to deaths at Bainbury Hall, all of the obscure ones that didn't get very much publicity. And it does confirm that many daughters have died at Bainbury Hall. And while Ewan is sitting in his study reading these articles, he tries to communicate with Curtis Carver again, asking if he's there when he feels a presence, and the record player turns on, playing 16 going on 17 again, and it starts skipping on the word careful. So when we left off, Maggie was going to confront Hannah about having been in the house and stealing and selling items, and it is in fact Hannah, which is pretty much what I thought. Hannah has been getting into the house, stealing and selling these items. She has no regrets but agrees to surrender her keys to Maggie. Maggie accuses Hannah of having placed Buster in the house, but Hannah denies this, saying that she has not seen Buster since Pentra's disappearance. When Hannah goes to get the keys, Elsa comes into the kitchen and tells Maggie, "You cannot stay in that house, you are gonna die there." And when Hannah comes back and gives Maggie the key, she says, "I never needed these to get into the house anyway. There is a secret back door behind the ivy." If you can hear somebody playing an instrument, it is my downstairs neighbor practicing, and there's nothing I can do about that, so I'm sorry. In this conversation between Maggie and Hannah, Hannah also tells Maggie that she had lied, that the events of the sleepover did not happen. Like, she did get punched in the face, but the armoire never flew open, dresses never went everywhere. That never happened. Just Maggie was a freak and started screaming. That's all that ever happened. Ewan is woken up by a screaming and punching Jess. He is getting beaten in his sleep. She is screaming, "How could you do this to Maggie?" He has no idea what she's talking about, and he gets up to check on Maggie. Maggie has handprints around her neck. And Ewan is like, "I didn't do this. I didn't do this by choice. It is William Garson controlling the fathers to hurt the daughters." That's what's happening. Jess is, of course, having none of this, and what mother would. She packs herself and Maggie up and leaves the house. And Ewan recognizes that this is the safest thing for Maggie. If Maggie is not in the house, she cannot come to harm. With no one left to seek advice from, Ewan sits down in the kitchen to await Curtis Carver to ring the bells again. Back to Maggie's point of view, she finds the hidden door hidden behind the ivy that leads through a secret passageway hidden in the walls, and it leads from the outside directly through the armoire in her childhood bedroom. Now she comes to believe that there never was a Mr. Shadow, that a real person was sneaking into her house and has always been sneaking into the house this way. Hours upon hours of waiting in the kitchen, and Ewan is finally contacted by Curtis Carver, and Ewan asks him for help in stopping William Garson, and Curtis answers no. Ewan objects, saying, "But he murdered your daughter," and Curtis answers no, and then spells out portrait. Not William Garson's portrait, but Indigo Garson's portrait. Ewan goes running upstairs and takes a closer look at Indigo's portrait and notices that where the rabbit is painted that she's holding, there is a thicker layer of paint, and the painting styles of Indigo versus the rabbit she is holding do not match. So he starts chipping away at this thicker layer of paint, and underneath the rabbit, Indigo is actually holding a snake, and Ewan passes out. Back to Maggie's point of view, she shittily calls Dane for help, and he agrees to where I would not have. She wants to disassemble the armoire, patch up the hole in the wall, and block out the door that leads inside, and leave Baneberry Hall. She is done asking questions. She has hit her limit of bullshit. She is ready to sell the house as is and move on with her life. She takes the Polaroids and the copy of the book back to her father's study, throws it on the desk, and when she is sure the book was closed when she dropped it, when she turns around, it is open again. It is open to the chapter of when the hole in the ceiling in the kitchen was patched. It dawns on Maggie that there is a photograph of this, and she looks at it again and sees that the boy who was hired to patch the ceiling hole with the maintenance man's help is Dane in the picture, a teenage Dane, and she quickly jumps to the conclusion that Dane was Petra's secret boyfriend. Dane was wearing the same t-shirt then as when we met him in the beginning of the book, and of course, this is when Dane arrives. When Ewan awakens, he comes to the realization that it was Indigo Garson, not William Garson, who has been hurting the daughters and killing the daughters. He contacts Curtis Carver again and asks how he can see Indigo. Curtis Carver spells out camera. Ewan rushes upstairs, gets the camera, looks through the Polaroids, sees that in the pictures is Miss Pennyface. Miss Pennyface, as I had guessed, is Indigo Garson. He feels another presence in the room and snaps a picture. It is not Curtis Carver, it is Indigo Garson, Miss Pennyface, in the room with him. He takes another picture, but it is not Miss Pennyface in the picture, it is Jess. She is back with Maggie at Baneberry Hall. Maggie is in danger again. Going back to Maggie's point of view, she confronts Dane and he admits he did have a summer romance with Petra, but that he did not kill her. He asks that Maggie not call the police, that she keep his secret because being an ex-con, the police will not understand and he will go back to prison for life for a crime he says he did not commit. Maggie freaks out and runs, and a chase ensues, and she tricks Dane to falling through the hidey hole in the indigo room down to the kitchen floor below, where he cracks his head and knocks out. Ewan tells Jess what he has discovered about Indigo Garson being the culprit and not William Garson. Jess finally comes out of denial for the first time in this entire book. They get to Maggie's room and Jess scoops her up, but she is sucked into the armoire and a tug of war ensues, and Ewan finally frees Maggie, and they haul ass down the stairs trying to flee Baneberry Hall. And as they are going, Ewan is snapping pictures behind them, but Miss Pennyface is hot on the pursuit, and when they get to the bottom of the stairs, Maggie is snatched out of Jess's hands and flies up and hits the ceiling and is dragged across the ceiling, kind of Conjuring style. To get this to stop, Ewan grabs a shard of glass and threatens to unalive himself, and Miss Pennyface cannot hurt him by hurting Maggie if he is dead. So Maggie drops, they grab her, snakes appear out of every corner of the room, they run out of the house and flee Baneberry Hall, but Maggie is screaming that Miss Pennyface is still pursuing them. A force hits the car and it veers off the road and they almost have an accident, but Ewan is able to correct it. They get to the gates, he shuts and locks the gate behind them, and they leave Baneberry Hall for good. And this is the conclusion of Ewan's point of view. This is the conclusion of House of Horrors. Back to Maggie's point of view, EMS arrives to take Dane to the hospital. Maggie and the sheriff have a "it's all over, this is the conclusion" kind of talk, but I am in serious doubt. And as the sheriff leaves, a car pulls up in the driveway, and it is Jess, Maggie's mother. They go down to the kitchen and have a conversation about everything that has happened and the conclusions that have been drawn from it. And they are eating a pie that Marta had given them when she had stopped by to visit, which will be important later. So they are talking, and Maggie tells Jess it was Dane who killed Petra. And Jess tells Maggie, "I wish you wouldn't have done that. I wish you wouldn't have digged into this. You're not gonna like the truth when you find it." And Maggie at that point realizes that she was wrong. It was not Dane who killed Petra. Duh, never thought it was. This is when Jess pulls an envelope out of her purse and gives it to Maggie and tells her it wasn't Dane that killed Petra, it was you. And she opens the letter and it's from her father. Now the letter contains a confession of sorts, not to killing Petra, but of writing a fictitious book. Ewan confesses that he wrote the book to protect Maggie. And in this confession, he tells us what is true from the book and what is a lie. They did find love letters to Indigo Garson, and he did give them to Petra. Maggie did have imaginary friends named Mr. Shadow and Miss Pennyface, but there were no ghosts. Maggie did see Dr. Weber as a child. There never were portraits of Indigo and William Garson in the big rooms. And the night that they fled Baneberry Hall, Jess and Ewan had planned a reconnection kind of date night in a motel and left Petra to babysit, but in secret because she wasn't supposed to go back to Baneberry Hall after the events of the sleepover where Maggie punched Hannah in the face. And also, just red flag right here for fathers. Do not ever tell your children that you planned a date night where you were gonna smash their mom. They don't want to know that. We don't want to know that. I didn't want to know that. When Jess and Ewan returned from date night, they found Petra dead at the bottom of the stairs. And Maggie had a cut under her eye. This is how she really got the cut, not hitting her face on the tombstone. And they assumed that Petra and Maggie had gotten to a dispute over Buster, that Maggie wanted the toy and pushed Petra down the stairs, or Petra fell down the stairs in the squabble. Now, when Ewan and Jess asked Maggie what happened, she said Miss Pennyface pushed Petra down the stairs. Deciding to keep the secret, not to call the police, to keep Maggie from spending all of her childhood in a juvenile delinquent detention center, they agree to hide Petra's body in the floorboards. After they hide Petra's body, they leave Baneberry Hall, get to the motel room, and decide that they need to report ghost hauntings right away, inspired by Maggie's words, when she asked if they had to leave because Miss Pennyface scared them away. That inspired the idea of the ghost story. They call the police. The sheriff, who at this point is just a deputy, comes, takes a statement. This is when they begin spinning the tale of the ghost story. What they hadn't anticipated was the media picking up on the story and the media circus ensuing, and a book deal coming in, and Ewan writing House of Horrors. We also learned that 2 weeks after they had left Baneberry Hall, Ewan returned to Baneberry Hall to get his typewriter to write the book, and that is what Hannah saw him doing. Ewan also yada yadas that Maggie didn't seem to remember anything that went on in Baneberry Hall, so they never thought they would have to confess to her what really happened. And because Petra's body was hidden in Baneberry Hall, that is why they never sold the house, and they really didn't need the money after the success of the book. Maggie loses her shit after reading the letter. She is a killer. She loses her marbles. Her and her mother get into an argument that Ewan and Jess should have called the police, should have done the right thing. Maggie should have been detained. All those things. They fight. Maggie slaps her mother across the face, and Jess leaves. Maggie literally begins to crawl her way up the stairs to her bedroom because she is feeling dizzy, she is feeling sick, and the armoire doors open and Miss Pennyface crawls out. But it is not pennies over her eyes, it is glasses, it is spectacles. It is Marta Carver coming through the armoire. Mrs. Pennyface was never real. And now comes time for Marta Carver's confession as Maggie is laying in agonizing pain. The pie that she ate that her mother really wouldn't eat was poisoned with baneberry. She's experiencing disassociation, stomach cramps. She's not fine. So Marta Carver begins to confess to her what her role in all of this was. Now Marta admits that Curtis Carver did kill Katie, and that after the loss of her daughter and husband, she was lost, and when she heard there was a little girl moving into Baneberry Hall, she was very curious. She knew about the hidden door, snuck into the house to watch Maggie sleep. But of course, one of those nights, Maggie wasn't alone. Petra was peeking in on Maggie to check on her and sees Marta Carver in the room and freaks out, goes to call the police, and that is when she and Marta were kind of wrestling down the stairs, and Petra fell and broke her neck, and that is how she died. And when Petra and Marta were squabbling on the stairs, Maggie tried to get involved to try to break it up, and Marta's ring caught Maggie in the face, and that's really how she got her scar. Now, Marta flees. Maggie is crying that it was Miss Pennyface when her parents show up, and Marta is kind of awaiting for the police to come arrest her. If the Holts were to do the right thing, were to call the police, then the police should come arrest Marta for her role in Petra's death. But they never come. So she comes to the realization that they didn't do the right thing, and that is really why they left Baneberry Hall. Now, Marta decides after her confession that it is time to end Maggie. Just like Katie was smothered with a pillow, she picks up a pillow to begin smothering Maggie, but Maggie still has enough strength to kind of roll over, buck her off, and start to crawl away. Maggie crawls to the staircase and falls down, and when she looks back at the top of the staircase, she does see Marta Carver, but she also sees a bit of a bright light that she says is Petra, and Marta Carver is pushed down the stairs. She falls down the stairs, breaks her neck in the same way Petra did. When Maggie looks back at the top of the stairs, it's not Petra standing there, it's Elsa. Elsa at some point had also snuck into the house, and now she really knows what happened to Petra. Elsa finally gets closure for her daughter after 25 years. That's kind of the end of the book, but we do get a prologue where Maggie has finished renovations on Baneberry Hall. She's ready to sell. She's ready to leave Vermont. She has come to the realization that it was Elsa who was actually Mr. Shadow, sneaking through the armoire to warn her that she was in danger, Elsa being a superstitious woman. Maggie has also destroyed the armoire, closed off the secret passage and the door. Good for her. Now, after Jess left, she went down to the police station trying to confess to Petra's murder to protect Maggie, thinking that Maggie was going to turn herself in. And Jess, confessing to having hidden Petra's body, is going to be receiving some kind of sentence, some kind of justice. And Maggie is ready to move on with her life, but is contacted by the publisher of her father's book to write a sequel. And being her father's daughter, she goes upstairs to the study, finds his typewriter, and begins writing the sequel, House of Secrets. And that is where we leave the end of the book. I have some thoughts, right? I feel like I enjoyed the experience of this book more than I enjoyed the actual book, right? Like, solving a mystery while reading is always very entertaining, very fun, but the characters were pretty shallow and generic. The setting is a generic Gothic style house, which I love, so good for me, but it wasn't the most unique situation. The writing was pretty generic. It didn't have its own voice. It could have been anybody writing this book, but I still liked it. I gave it 3.75 stars. I'm going to say I liked it. I'm going to say I'm excited for another Riley Sager book. I was not sure which way I was going to go because I know a lot of people either love Riley Sager's writing or hate Riley Sager's writing. I seem to be somewhat in the middle, but loving the concept of the book, loving having fun with the book. Now, I will be the first to admit that my theory about what happens in this book was wrong and that I got a little bit caught up in the House of Horrors book the way a fan of the book maybe might have. And I admit that. I should have followed the simpler explanation, not the paranormal explanation, but I'm an X-Files girly. I'm a Mulder all the way. I couldn't help myself. And those are all my thoughts. What did you think of Home Before Dark? I think the title has nothing to do with the book, and that's just a little bit of annoyance for me personally. You know, literally anything else, but sure, Home Before Dark, which has nothing to do with the story at all. Fine, why not? So let me know what your thoughts on this book were in the comments down below. Like, subscribe, come back for more bookish content, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Bye!